It's an update on the Devil Den's homicide investigation, and you and I have not talked about this, but I just want to say before you get started so that committee members, and if I'm wrong, then you can correct me, but I know a lot of the information that's involved in this investigation. You may be asked a lot of questions today that we're not privy to. And, because at some point in time, the person that committed this crime has got to be brought to justice. And so the last thing we want to do is for you to share any information that in any way could jeopardize that investigation or cause any issues as far as when the individual is finally brought to trial. Yes, so sir. We understand that is what I'm saying. Yes, so sir. If it's something you can't discuss with us, I just wanted to lay the groundwork for that I understand how that goes, and I understand how sometimes how sensitive information is, especially in an investigation of this nature. I will say this before I turn it over to you, Colonel, that I'm sure like every member on this committee, I've had so many comments about state police and other law enforcement agencies and their role involved in this investigation. And I'll just tell you, those comments, then they turned into compliments, just one right after another. So, I applaud you before we get started. What a great job. And it just amazes me how in such a short period of time and with the way you were able to bring everyone together and all the investigators, and not just from the state police, but like I said, other agencies, and coordinate that effort with one mission in mind, and that was to find the individual or individuals and make sure that, they were brought to justice. And yes, so I'm always amazed, how it all worked out, and I applaud law enforcement for another great job. I know technology has changed quite a bit since I was involved in it, but just the way y'all handled that is just amazing. And like I said, but we understand today if there's certain parts of the investigation that you are unable to, to share with us. But with that in mind, you're recognized to give us an update on the Devil Den's homicide case.
Okay. Well, to echo your comments, first need to say that I did nothing on this investigation other than just being kept informed. I have a certain amount of guilt about always being the person that is standing at a podium or answering questions or talking about that, because I feel like that the true heroes in this, the investigators that did the casework on this, I cannot say enough about them. Just unbelievable police work, and it was a combination of new technology and new investigative techniques in working hand in hand with, as Major Rose put it, old-fashioned police work. And it was the combination of those two things that allowed them to make the arrest as quick as they did. I know these guys. I know who they are. I know what their capabilities are, but you forget sometimes. Until you see a case like this playing out, there was a lot of national interest in this. And, of course, with that being the case, there was a lot of interest in the state from our governor on down through members of the legislature, and received a lot of phone calls, had a lot of concern, a lot of questions that were asked, a lot of questions from the media. And it's sometimes frustrating for us. We want to get more information. We want to talk about more things. We want to put more out, but at the same time, we have to be very guarded about what we put out and make sure that we're not doing anything that's detrimental to the case. So I would love to stand on the highest mountain and scream the praises and talk specifically about what they did, and I'm anxious for the day that all the details of the investigation can come out to highlight the work. It was absolutely incredible what these guys did. I'm very proud of them for that. Of course, it can't be lost. The reason that this hit all of us so close is because of that family and the victims. And had the opportunity to talked to that family multiple times, got to visit with them in person, and it's a heartbreaking ordeal. I don't, there's no words. You know, I've said before, I can't express what they're feeling because I can't even understand it. But those two little girls are absolute heroes. What they were able to do, the information they were able to give, it all started with them. Had it not been for them, we don't make an arrest on this case, at least not this quick. So I'm just in absolute awe of those little girls and how strong they were. Couldn't be more proud of them. Got a chance to visit with them a couple of days ago, and just the sweetest little girls that you've ever met in your life, and they're just little girls. I mean, it's heartbreaking. I don't know. I know that you guys have seen the information that's been released to the press. I don't pretend to know what questions you may have, but with that, I'll open it up to any question I can answer. I will certainly do my best.
Senator Rice, you're recognized for a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Colonel, for being here today, and appreciate all your work on this and other things too. As I watch the news media and that all come together, I just greatly appreciate the professionalism and just human compassion that was shown for that family, and I think about those little girls that'll be with them the rest of their life. I don't see how they couldn't have a fear about doing anything. And the real fact is this can happen anywhere and any time in today's society. There is a interest in the public from wanting to know, and I understand the reasons you can't share some things and all, and I just read an article while we were sitting here about the judge closed the courtroom today and even taped over the one window that you could see in the courtroom. And I mean, there's interest from the public that wants to know. And yes, this case has to move forward, but I don't understand that either. Right. And we had that happen with a former colleague of ours and a friend of ours that was killed a few years ago in Senator Collins. And it was frustrating when the courts move stuff around and all, and you don't understand a lot of reasons for that. So anyway, what I'm getting at is I just appreciate the position you're in, and thank you again for your work. I want to touch on just a little, and I think we'll probably hear some more stuff maybe in a different committee at some time. And I sure don't want to take anything away from what y'all have done on this case and other cases too, but it's been brought up, and the news media touched on the Second Amendment rights, or the lack of rights that people have on having guns for safety in state parks, and I think that's going to be addressed from maybe the Parks Department. Yes. Can you give us your thoughts on that? How can the public use their Second Amendment rights to maybe keep something like this from happening?
Question like that makes my wife nervous because she says the world according to Mike. I can give you my opinion on that.
I'll be glad to have your opinion. I respect your opinion.
Yeah. Well, my opinion is, and I think it's sometimes people are surprised to learn that police officers are as pro Second Amendment rights as we are. Unfortunately, we do deal with bad people that have weapons, and that's addressed accordingly when we do. But the more good people that we have with weapons and the ability to defend themselves, the better that we all are. And I'm an absolute believer in that ability to defend not only myself but my family, and I think everybody has that right. There's a certain amount of if you look at some of our cities and states around the country that have a lot more restrictive behavior as it relates to Second Amendment rights, they do not have what one would think of. You know, if you restrict guns and there should be less gun crime. That's just not the case. I mean, and we see that. That's not, an opinion. That's facts. I mean, we know that. So there's a certain amount of apprehension in Arkansas of going into a bedroom window when there's an outstanding chance that Arkansan in that house has probably got a shotgun or a rifle and they know how to use it. So I would say that the ability to pull off a crime like that is impeded significantly just by the fear of what's waiting on them on the other side. I can tell you as a police officer, I've never minded encountering a good law-abiding citizen that has a weapon, ever. I've never felt threatened by that at all. Unfortunately, we do encounter the criminal element, and they do have weapons. And every vehicle we approach it with the thought process that this person may be a bad person armed with the intent to hurt me, and you have to. I mean, that's part of it. But my personal opinion is, yes, to say we're pro-Second Amendment right in law enforcement, certainly in state police, is an understatement. I absolutely believe in that right, and I think it's healthy for the state.
Thank you for expressing that. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Any further questions from committee members?
I have a question.
Co-chair,
Sorry.
if you're recognized.
Thank you. One of the things that I just wanted you to kind of highlight, if you'll just recap, sometimes we see the media, but the purpose, I think, of today in this committee for us as a legislature is we see the reports of the media, but it may not be complete from
Right.
the things that you kind of went through on this investigation. Could you just kind of briefly go back through just the time? I don't know if you have it in front of you or not, but I think it's significant, the timeline of how quickly you were able to apprehend this suspect. And then if you can just also go through the technology that was and the calls that came in, were you able to process that quickly? Did you have the resources that you needed? Did you rely on other agencies for answering those tips or calls? Those are the kinds of things that I'm interested in hearing about this investigation, because you did move so fast, and I know that, and I really appreciate the governor being there on site and talking about this and communicating very thoroughly. Sometimes we don't see that level of communication with the public, as Senator Rice was talking about. But if you could just quickly just go through, I think it's just so significant to talk about the timeline and then how quickly you were able to apprehend, and then if you relied on any other, partnerships and agencies and how that intersected, and is there going to be a kind of a process agency review, just like what you're talking about with the mass casualty community outreach issue?
Right.
Like, what did we learn, from just the process? So not speaking of the case or anything individual there, but
Sure.
just that timeline, how quickly you were able to react.
Right. Well, so as far as the investigation itself, it did present challenges that are not ordinary. I think most people realize that a random act, that there's no personal connection between a suspect and a victim, is actually extremely rare. Mm-hmm. Honestly, most homicide investigations are not necessarily whodunits. It's more of collecting evidence, making the arrest, and then preparing that case for trial and just making sure that all the I's are dotted and T's are crossed. It's not extremely common that you work a case that you can't develop a lead and a suspect within a fairly short amount of time. In this one, we, in addition to the terrain where the crime occurred, that automatically caused a lapse of the time that it took for those little girls to get to someone to make them aware that this had happened, and then the time it took them to get out to the ranger station to make those notifications, and then, of course, the time that it took to get to the crime scene. So,
How far was that approximately?
Is from the trailhead, it was about a half a mile into the woods.
Was a trail clearly marked? Or easy to navigate?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
From my understanding, it's very
Sorry.
similar. I've not been in that park specifically, but it's very similar from my understanding of Pinnacle Mountain, Petit Jean, things like that, where they're clearly marked hiking trails.
Okay.
So, one of the things that it wasn't an impediment necessarily, but you had to pause on some of the information that was put out because, again, everything started with those two little girls that had just witnessed something that it's hard to even, process what those girls had witnessed. So when you are working off a description of a suspect, knowing that person has been, those, juveniles have been traumatized so much, there's a lot of collaboration that has to go into that. Not that you don't trust them, but we know from law enforcement from years of doing this job that eyewitness accounts are sometimes flawed. Mm-hmm. So especially when somebody witnesses a traumatic event, that it skews their memory. And so when the information on the suspect was developed from these girls, there was quite a time lapse to be able to corroborate that with other witnesses that saw people or saw the person that matched the description that these girls gave us. And then by the time that you take that and you start to corroborate that information, and then that leads to the car being identified from a person that saw the suspect that was identified by that was described by the little girls. And then that information, you start working off that, and to the technology that was used. We live in a day of Ring cameras and surveillance cameras and security cameras that are stationed throughout, and they were able to go back and look at every possible route in and out of that park and capture data that was that captured that potential suspect vehicle. And then we were able to narrow that down to the one particular car that we felt like was our car of interest. There are some technology things that I probably won't get into today that are available that helped us identify that car, isolate that specific car once it was identified. And that led, of course, to the arrest itself. One thing that I, would like to touch on, we met every day. At the end of the day, we would have a conference call with the investigators, and we talked about the need for the public, and I believe in that, and I believe that we owe it to the public to try to put as much information out as possible. But you're always hesitant in a situation like this, because if we put out what we think and what we suspect, but it's not actually the case, and I'll give you an example. We knew that this suspect was injured. We knew that there was blood loss on scene. We suspected that we knew if it was consistent with attacks like that and other crime scenes and other crimes that had been investigated, we suspected we knew the types of injuries. Our concern about that was, number one, we didn't put that out to the public immediately, because the first thing that those investigators did was went to every emergency room and urgent health care center in a tri-state area, just anywhere that was within basically driving distance of that area, and notified them that if anyone comes into that treatment facility seeking medical treatment with wounds consistent that we were looking for, that we needed to be notified. Well, if we put that information out to the media, then obviously we're going to push that guy away from medical treatment.
Right.
And because he knows that we're looking for that, he knows that he's injured, or that we know that he's injured. Mm-hmm. So there's a time lapse before we can push that information out. Once that time did lapse, then we did go ahead and release the information that we felt like he was injured. Having said that, we didn't know what those injuries were. We knew that there was a violent struggle out there, and we didn't know if he was injured to his hands, to his arms, if he had head injuries. We knew that there was blood loss, but we didn't know for sure. So you're inclined to put out to the public that, we're looking for a person that matches this description that may have these types of wounds. But what if we get that wrong? And we're working off percentages that we feel like that there's a good chance that that's the type of wounds that this person has. But it turns out that wasn't the case. And now there's a suspect that someone may think that, hey, we need to take a look at this guy. I think that, it's someone that you'd be interested in. But, he doesn't have cuts to his hands or his arms, or,
right.
Some of the things that we are kind of speculating about at that point because it's not confirmed. So we have to be very careful about unintentionally putting a red herring out there that now we have people not calling in and giving us information that we need because it doesn't fit certain things that we think it should fit. And, so that's always a concern. I can tell you that every day when we met with the investigators and our communications team, it was specifically with the intent of giving the public as much information as we could possibly give them without giving them something that was going to be detrimental to the case. In addition to identifying and arresting this subject, we also have to prosecute him successfully. And so even as we sit here today, there's a little bit of, concern about at some point a jury is going to be seated. And, we can't give a lot of information that might be considered inflammatory because we don't want to prejudice that jury. And we don't want to give a defense the opportunity to claim that we've prejudiced that jury. So I can tell you that there was a lot of discussion about having a press conference immediately and addressing the media. But one of the things that's a pet peeve of mine is for someone to call a press conference to only stand there and say, I don't know, or I won't say. Mm-hmm. That's extremely frustrating. And so we didn't want to do that. So we put out as much information as we could, as quickly as we could. But all the while, it had to be calculated on, is this going to hinder the investigation? Is this going to help us? And a lot of the information that we put out did result in tips and things like that we were able to work off of that helped tremendously. And to another question that you asked as far as like the tip lines and things like that, honestly, we were overwhelmed with people that are very well-intentioned that are calling and they're trying to give information that they think we need to know. And until you triage that information and you realize that it's either beneficial or it's not, there's some that you can, kind of write off pretty quick, and there's some that you can't. But if you receive 500 plus tips, that's 500, different directions now we're sending our investigators. So it's a very lengthy process, which you can quickly get outside of your bandwidth on your capability. In this particular case, we had no reason to believe on the front end that there was any connection between our victim and our suspects. But we didn't know that. And it's something that you have to, look into and close that loophole. So you immediately start doing almost a background of your victims and trying to find if there's any type of adversarial relationships that they have. In this situation, our victims were from California. They had moved to Montana, then to South Dakota, then most recently to Arkansas. And so there was a huge geographical area that we had to cover to talk to neighbors, talk to work associates, talk to family members, anything and everything that you could think of, trying to establish if there was some type of relationship that we need to look at, if there was a possible, motive behind this. And, every lead that you're having to either close the loophole on or follow up on, it's spreading those resources out pretty quick. So we did rely on other state, city, and federal agencies to assist with that. We have federal partners that were able to assist us with some technology that that proved to be very, very beneficial. So it was absolutely a coordinated effort. One thing that we're blessed in Arkansas, as Captain Tosh knows, unfortunately this is not always the case, but just tell it like it is, law enforcement tends to be very territorial sometimes, and they're very hesitant to reach out for help. And in Arkansas, we are so blessed that we don't deal with that. I got calls immediately from sheriffs, police chiefs, special agents in charge of FBI, HSI, you name it. Whatever the federal acronym is, they were calling saying, what do you need? How can we help you? And so it's nice to not only know that they're there if we reach out to them, but they were reaching out to us. Okay. And it was the same with all of our local partners there, even the partners in California and those other states that I mentioned. So it quickly can overwhelm resources, so you have to rely on those relationships. And we're very blessed in Arkansas that we've got a really good relationship with our local and federal partners. And it made all the difference in this case, and it's the reason that an arrest was made as fast as it was.
Thank you. I appreciate that recap. And the final thing I'll just say is I really appreciate y'all focusing on the heroic behavior of the mother.
Yes.
And the time that you took to talk about the victims, and the father, obviously, but for that mother to take her children and then to return, the heroism, of those parents but thank you for focusing on the victims and their heroism. Thank you.
Thank you, Co-Chair. And Colonel, let me just kind of go back and something you said, and so everybody in the committee, they probably understand this, but to make sure the Arkansas State Police, as defined by law, is an assisting agency.
Yes,
so whatever agency in which that crime, in that jurisdiction in which the crime was committed, they have to, am I correct? They
Yes,
have
sir.
to make a request for the assistance of the Arkansas State Police before we can respond to that crime scene.
Yes, sir,
And
that's
so,
correct.
but I agree with you. In years past, the local agencies, they've always been fantastic to reach out to the state police. There's been a few situations over the years where we had a delay, and by the time the state police got there, obviously the crime scene was not exactly the way you'd want it to be, but in this particular case, it was an immediate request to the state police, which is what you find most of the time with the relationship that state police has with other law enforcement agencies across the state. But I just wanted to make sure, and I'm correct about all that.
Yes, sir. By statute.
By statute.
We are an assisting agency. I think when the state police was formed in 1935, there were kind of guardrails put into place because at that time the legislative body did not want to create an agency that was going to come in and run roughshod basically over their sheriff's departments, their police departments, and rightfully so. So it is a statutory obligation for us to take primary on a case. We have to be requested either by the agency of jurisdiction or the prosecuting attorney in that district. And that request was made immediately in this situation.
And I appreciate that. That's the first time that you've ever mentioned that state police was, they were formed by statute in 1935, that you didn't say that's when I was hired. And so, I really was expecting that. But
well, I was hoping you weren't going to ask me if I remembered the incident in 1972 because that was a year before I was born. So that's...
Yeah, I do. But anyways, I want to thank you. We got another Representative Ladyman, you're recognized for a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm over here.
Yes, sir.
Thank you for being here and talking about this. Very interesting. But you mentioned you're a support organization. My understanding is you have the highway system, but we talk about jurisdiction. And I used to be a mayor, and I understand that a little bit. But who would have the primary jurisdiction here? Would that be the fish and game officers in this case, or would that be the county sheriff?
I'll be honest with you that I'm not sure of the technicality of that. This occurred in Washington County, and so typically there's a kind of established protocol, whether if it's in a city park, a state park, a game and fish reserve, things like that. On if an incident happens, who's going to be the report taker and who's going to do a follow-up investigation. I think it was established quite some time back that if an incident happened within that state park, that state police would be primary. But we, just because, of course, our partners at state parks, they're certified police officers, they're rangers, just like we have a lot of entities that have full law enforcement certifications, but we all have kind of our own piece of the pie, and we specialize in different things. And they don't have an investigative service that that would be realistic to investigate a crime of this nature. So that's the reason that state police took.
Well, I knew that fish and game officers, have a lot of authority in a lot of areas in the
Sure.
state, probably more than any other group of officials or officers. And that park, Devil's Den Park, I've been there quite a few times, and that thing is huge. And it just amazes me that you all and whoever worked on this was able to do this, because you could get lost in that park for hours or days, and to have two young girls, roughly what age were these girls? I mean,
They were 7 and 9.
oh my, I mean, that's amazing. And so they had to find their way back to
They found their way to another hiker who and told the other hiker what had happened, and then that person took them out to the ranger station.
Well, it's just amazing that they did that. And, you know, the amount of surveillance that you have in a park that large, I mean, you know, the evidence had to be pretty sketchy in that situation. So it was amazing to me that y'all were able to do this so quick. So thank you for your work.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you, Representative Lademan. Representative Rye, you're recognized for a question.
From the time that this actually occurred until the time that you actually knew that you had your person, how long do you think it took?
I think the crime was on Saturday afternoon,
Yes, sir.
and I believe the arrest was made. And I'm sorry, my days and nights started running together, but it was either Wednesday or Thursday. And the information started to develop quickly. When we felt comfortable, we were on the right track, and we felt that we had corroborated a lot of evidence and a lot of information. And once that vehicle was identified, I would say within the hour, we had our suspect in custody.
Considering, sir, that you had these children that you had to use for help, you're to be commended.
It's those little girls are heroes. It is yeah. For an adult to be able to give the information in light of that, those events would be pretty amazing. The amount of detail they were able to give us for a 7 and a 9-year-old to do that is incredible. It's absolutely incredible. I can't say enough about those little girls and that mom and dad that raised those little girls. That's one thing, to Senator Urban's point, that we, in talking with the family, you know, we all look at things from a different perspective, and for us, it's all about evidentiary, and it's about finding this person, making our case. When we talked to that family, they were adamant about, don't forget Clint and Kristen.
Excellent work. Excellent work. Thank you, sir.
Colonel, seeing no further questions for committee members, Representative Long, you're recognized for a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm not a committee member, but that's why I waited till the end. I wanted to ask the Colonel a question, if I may.
Yes, you're recognized.
Colonel, this past weekend, 17-year-old Hannah Osborne come up missing in my community of Bradford, and I assume state police is involved in that. And I was wondering if you could offer any updates on how that investigation's going.
Honestly, sir, I can't. Not because I can't disclose it. I don't know. I've been briefed about that she is missing. I know that our communication shop is working with local authorities to push information out. I know we are investigating that, but I apologize. I don't know any details about it.
Well, thank you, sir. I appreciate y'all's help in this.
Seeing no further questions, Colonel, I just want to say in closing, really appreciate you being here today. And I know sometimes to have to sit and to relive a situation like this, and what you went through there can be emotionally tough on an individual. And I just want to applaud you for the great job you did and the way you handled yourself today, and for updating this committee, and also for the outstanding job you did in keeping us all informed through the media in your interviews. You just did an outstanding job. You handled yourself so well, and I know that I'm very appreciative of it. And I know you give credit. I understand that. That's what a good leader does. And you give credit to the men and women of the Arkansas State Police, just as you've done that here today, and to other agencies. But, I've always said that members of any agency are a reflection of their leader. So even though you may want to pass on credit to the men and women of your department, it's what you should do, but we want to pass on to you that we recognize your leadership and the great job you do in leading the Arkansas State Police, because the ones that I've been around, they just seem to possess, the members of the state police seem to possess that spirit of service now that, just doing whatever it takes to get the job done. And I think that was well demonstrated in this investigation. So with that, seeing, you had a question you wanted me to ask, Senator?
Sorry. So because it happened in the state park requested the state police, and then y'all led the investigation. Is that correct?
I don't know if the request formally came from the sheriff's department or the state parks, honestly.
Okay.
I would have to go back and pull the letter to see.
I just wanted to get clarity on that. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you, Senator. Seeing no other business, this meeting is adjourned.